You've seen it. A new dance appears, a new gadget gets crowned, a new show becomes mandatory. Most people don't choose it. They absorb it, and then there's someone who doesn't. They scroll past, no pause, no comment, no purchase. That's when the labels show up. Contrarian, boring, trying too hard. But their resistance isn't a performance, it's a signal. One question explains it. Where do you get your sense of self? For a lot of people, trends are a social language, a way to connect, a way to feel part of the group. That's external approval. Feeling good because you match, because you fit. But the person who never joins the trend runs on a different source. Their worth doesn't arrive from outside, it comes from inside. From what they care about, from what they stand for. They don't need a trend to tell them who they are, because they already know. And that mindset shows up in 3 psychological patterns: a stable identity that doesn't ask for updates, a strict protection of mental energy, and a reflex that rejects being pushed. We'll break each one down, but keep this in mind as we go. Their silence isn't aimed at you. It's aimed at the pressure. Because when something starts telling everyone what they should do, some brains don't feel connection, they feel a threat to choice. Trends look harmless when you're inside them. A dance, a show, a gadget, a phrase. Small things people share so they don't feel separate. For most people, that's what a trend really is. Not a passion, a social language. A way to say, I'm still here with you. That's why participation feels good. Not because the trend is meaningful, because the response is. The nods, the laughs, the recognition. You don't have to explain yourself. You just match the signal and you're accepted. Psychology has a simple name for that source of comfort: extrinsic validation. Your sense of value comes from outside, from approval, from fitting into the shape that's already been rewarded. Sometimes it's subtle. You don't even notice you're doing it. You just feel a small tension when you're not up to date. A quiet pressure to watch what everyone watched, to own what everyone owns, to have an opinion, even if it isn't yours yet. But the person who ignores the trend isn't built around that system. Their worth isn't waiting for permission. It isn't negotiated in public. Intrinsic validation, that's the other source code. The sense of I'm okay comes from inside, from principles, from taste, from what holds steady when nobody is looking. They don't need the trend to tell them who they are. Not because they're trying to be above it, because they already have a center. Some people don't skip trends because they're trying to look different. They skip them because they already know who they are. Their sense of self is stable. Not perfect, not loud, just settled. They know what they like, what they believe, how they want to present themselves. So when a trend shows up, it doesn't feel like opportunity. It feels like noise. For them, a trend isn't an exciting new thing to try. It's an unnecessary update to a system that's already running. Not because they're stubborn, because the trend doesn't connect to anything inside them. That's the key. They're not avoiding it to make a statement. They're ignoring it because it's irrelevant to the person they already are. And when your identity is anchored, you don't need a crowd to confirm it. You don't need a wave to tell you where to stand. You just keep walking in your own direction. So if someone calls that boring, let them. Stability looks like silence to people who depend on noise. And the strangest part is this. They're not judging anyone for joining. They simply don't feel pulled. Because their self doesn't come from what's popular. It comes from what's consistent.
If this content makes sense to you, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for your support.
Your focus is a currency, not a metaphor, a real limit. You wake up with a fixed amount of attention, and every day, the world tries to spend it for you. Following trends costs more than people admit. It's time to learn the dance. It's money to buy the thing. It's hours to watch the show. And then it's the final expense. You have to form an opinion fast enough to participate. For the person who avoids trends, that whole process feels like a bad trade. Not because they can't keep up, because they can, and that's exactly why they refuse to waste it. They protect their mental energy for what survives the week, their hobbies, their work, their relationships, things that build quietly instead of burning loudly. So it isn't laziness, it's a kind of discipline, ruthless efficiency with attention. When something demands focus just to be relevant for a moment, they feel the cost in their body, they sense the drain before it happens, and they choose not to pay it. That's why they scroll past, not to make a point, not to look different, but because they're guarding the only resource you never get refunded: their attention, their time, their mind. There's a certain reflex some people carry. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's simply a private resistance that rises the moment pressure appears. Psychologists call it psychological reactance, a gut-level response that says, "Don't steer me." For someone wired this way, a trend doesn't arrive as a harmless suggestion. It arrives as instruction, not spoken directly, but felt. When the same behavior gets pushed everywhere, when the same thing is presented as what people should be doing, the mind reads it as a threat to choice. That's the key difference. To some, joining feels like connection. To them, joining feels like surrender, not because they want to be difficult, not because they need to prove anything, but because their autonomy matters more than the comfort of blending in. They can sense the hidden demand behind the invitation. Everyone's doing it doesn't sound like fun. It sounds like a lever, so they step back. Not as rebellion, as self-preservation, and that's why their silence can look like judgment, even when it isn't. They're not scoring points against what's popular. They're guarding the one thing they refuse to trade: freedom of choice. Some people don't follow trends for clean reasons. They're stable, they're focused, they're not hungry for approval. But sometimes it's not that. Sometimes, I don't follow trends isn't a choice. It's a shield. There are simple reasons a person steps away. They're socially exhausted. They're overstimulated. They don't want to be seen. They can't justify the cost. Or they've been disappointed enough times that they don't trust the crowd to lead them anywhere worth going. That's where trend avoidance splits into two kinds. One kind is clean. You skip what doesn't matter to you. You keep your energy. You don't pretend enthusiasm just to be accepted. The other kind is defensive. Not because you know who you are, but because you don't want contact. Not because you're free, but because you're shut down. If you want to know which one you're living in, don't argue with yourself. Just listen. When you refuse a trend, do you feel calm, or do you feel superior? Do you feel clear, or do you feel numb? Are you protecting your focus, or are you avoiding people? This is the point. The goal isn't to follow trends. The goal is to not be owned by your reasons for refusing them. If you want a sense of self that doesn't need permission, build it on 3 anchors. First, principles. Pick 3 rules you don't break. Not when it's convenient, not when it gets you approval. Rules you keep even when it costs you something. That's where your spine comes from. Second, taste. Keep a small library that reflects you, what you read, what you watch, what you return to. Not because it's popular, but because it fits. Over time, that collection becomes proof, not to other people, to you. Third, focus. Choose one long skill, one thing you invest in while everything else flashes and disappears. Put your time there. Put your attention there. Let the rest pass without grabbing you by the collar. Trends are temporary. A self built from the inside lasts. You're not wrong if you follow trends. Sometimes it's just a language, a way to be in the room without explaining yourself, a way to share something simple with other people. And you're not wrong if you ignore them. Some people don't need a trend to feel real. They don't need a crowd to confirm their taste. They're not making a statement. They're just not moved by what's popular. So I'll ask you the direct question. Are you a trend follower or a trend avoider? And if you avoid them, what was the one trend everyone was obsessed with that you just couldn't get into? Tell me what it was, and tell me why. Because that answer says more about your psychology than the trend ever did.